Hi everyone, this is Dorothy Newbury-Birch and I'm going to today be talking you through the basics of conducting a systematic review. So you should have seen part one of this before you come into this, but today we're just going to go through what are the different elements of systematic reviewing. So again, a little bit about me. I'm Professor of Alcohol and Public Health Research at the School of Social Sciences, Humanities and Law at Teesside University. And I lead a team of 20 researchers and PhD students. Probably every single one of them have done a systematic review or are currently doing one. I'm leading work package 3 of the What's in a Meter project with Dr. Gillian Waller, and I will be providing, or I am providing, public health and co-production expertise to the project. So what we're going to do today is we're going to go through the different parts of a systematic review. Now this is just a quick overview of how we do systematic reviewing. Normally, to learn how to do a systematic review will take you about 3 days of training. So I advise that you read up quite a lot on this, but I'm going to take you through defining a question, scoping the literature, looking for all the studies that address the question that you're wanting to answer. Then we have to sift the studies to find the ones that we want that answer the question, and how we do data extraction, data synthesis, and then what do we make of the results. So we're going to talk through that a little bit today. So before you start, you have to have a good question. So your question has to answer what you want to know. So we talked a little bit in the first session about, do we want to know if something is effective? And if we want to know if it's effective, we would include randomized controlled trials or other trials that have a control group. So the question becomes really important. So do you want to know whether or not something is effective? Do you want to know what the prevalence of such a thing is? Do you want to know whether there are barriers and facilitators to using something? You can actually have a systematic review on virtually anything, but you need to make sure your question leads the way in terms of how you're going to answer it and what you're going to do. And the best way that I know in order to do this is for you to actually look and find reviews or papers that would be similar to what you want to do. It might be a different topic area, but it may be, if you want to know about effectiveness or barriers and facilitators, find another systematic review that's done that, and you can then learn from that in terms of defining your question. Once you've got that question, it's important for you to think, without doing it in any systematic way, for you to find 3 papers that you think would answer the research question. So this is before you do anything else. You just know, I want to look at effectiveness of alcohol brief interventions. So I'll find 3 papers of randomized controlled trials. And what's really important from that is that these will help you define every part of what you're doing, but it'll help you define your search terms. And I always say to students and researchers, keep them on the left of your desk, because you need to make sure, if they answer your research question, that they are included in the study. So they're a sense check to see whether or not when you do your searches, they actually come up. Because if they don't, there's something wrong with your search terms. And you have to use a literature management tool. And for me and for my team, we use EndNote. But there are others out there, because I know EndNote you have to pay for. So there's Mendeley. It's actually EndNote online now as well. So there's different ones that you can use. Find one that you like. Keep a separate database for this systematic review. compared to your other literature that you use. And that will become a management tool for what you're doing. So the focus of the question, depending on whether it's quantitative or qualitative, so quantitative is numbers. Does something work? And what you're doing is you're looking at your population. So who is it that you're interested in? Are you interested in everybody in the whole world? Or are you interested in a specific group of people? What is the intervention that you want to see if it works? What does it look like? What does it contain? What are your comparisons? And for that, I mean, what are your control groups? And normally we just say any, but you may want to include certain control groups within that. What are your outcomes of interest? So you may not be interested in, if I was doing about alcohol brief interventions, I may be interested in the health component of that, or I might be interested in the criminal justice component of that if I was looking at reoffending and things. Or I might want both, and that's okay. And then what kind of study design, and we've just spoke about that. So for more qualitative work, you're looking at your sample, which is your population, your phenomenon of interest. So again, if we're looking at brief interventions, we're looking for studies that include information around the barriers and facilitators. And for sample, you might want to include the person who gets the brief intervention or the person who gives the brief intervention or both. You want to look at the design and the evaluation that you would be including in that, and what kind of research type. Normally, for qualitative work, you would include qualitative, maybe open-ended questions from surveys could be included. And in fact, a lot of my students do include them. Once you've got that, you then need to make a list of what you will include and what you won't include. Now, it's really important that you do this, because if you don't do it, you'll change your mind as you're doing the sifting. So you can make a comprehensive list of inclusion and exclusion. And these can be, you can go backwards and forwards to them, but at the point of data extraction, you need to have defined this. So for instance, are you going to include forever and a day? Or are you going to say, well, brief interventions came into being in the 80s, so we're only going to search from the 80s because there won't be much before then? Or are we going to say, well, actually, I'm really interested in what's happened since an NHS policy change. So therefore, that would be the date we would look at. And it doesn't matter as long as you've given a rationale for it. So that's really important. So let's pretend we've got our question, and we've got an idea of what we want to do. We've done some scoping, so that's where I talked about the 3 papers that you would find. And where do you search? Well, it depends what your topic area is. So for me in public health, I search CINAHL, Scopus, Medline, but it depends what subject area that you're looking in. So it's really important that you look to find the search engines that will answer the question that you're asking. This is where you start thinking about your inclusion, exclusion, and some of that, as I've said, is years to search. Another one might be countries. If you're looking at effectiveness of an intervention, you would probably include any and every country for that. But if you were looking to see barriers and facilitators, you may want it in relation to the English context or the USA context. And that's absolutely fine if that's what your research language, if that's what your research question is. Is it going to be beneficial for you to know about America, where they charge for interventions, in relation to something that you want to answer in terms of the UK? Or it may be you want to include it in compare and contrast. This is one that gets me every time. There is absolutely no reason to not include any language in systematic reviews. I've always felt it gives a sense of bias that you're not including all data, but also because we have such good online tools now to change things from one language to another, that I don't think we need to do this now. So please include any language. You need to consider different words. So you might think, I want to do something about alcohol. But actually, when you start looking at it, you realise that people use different words to say the same thing. So for alcohol, they may say drink, they may say booze, they may say binge, and there's a lot more out there. Now, one good thing about searching is if you put ALCO, A-L-C-O, and a star, it'll pick up anything that relates to alcohol, alcoholism, alcoholic. So any word that has that as a starting point. This is really important. And the way to actually do this is, well, I do two things for mine. I find systematic reviews in the same area, not answering the same question, obviously. And I look to see what their search strategy was. But I also use things like Wikipedia to see what other words there are in terms of asking that question. And again, it's all trial and error, because you've got your three papers on the left of your desk. So, you know, you can find out whether or not you're using the right terms. And of course, how you search could be different in different databases. So your search engines they always do. They ask you for it in a slightly different way. So lots of trial and error. So what we do is we search so you come up with your search strategy, and you go into your different databases and you do a search, and you would normally get about 7,000 to 10,000 when you pull them all together. But what you'll find is, so if you're using three search engines, one might say 7,000, one might say 4,000, and one might say 6,000. So we all start to panic at that point. But actually, you bring them all into EndNote, you transfer them into EndNote, and each system will tell you how to do that. And then you press a magic button that lets you get rid of all of your duplicates. And what you find is a lot of that 4,000 were also in the 7,000. So you might end up with 8,000 in total. So it's really important that you get them all into a management tool and get rid of your duplications. Otherwise, you're just going to spend ages doing this. So let's just say we've got our search into EndNote, and we know we've got 10,000 just for ease. So what you have to do for each of them, you can do all of this on EndNote, is you actually have to read the title and the abstract if you need to, because the title very often will tell you it's not. The majority of papers are going to go by the wayside at this point. You'll be surprised how many come through that aren't relevant to the research question. And what you're going to do is you're going to categorise them as either yes or no. And if they're yes, they go through to the second sift. And if they're no, they don't. And you don't have to give any reason for your no's at that point. So then we've had 10,000 and we're down to 100 for second sift. So for second sift, for all of those that you've said yes to, you need to get the full copies of the papers. Because at the minute, you're just using the title and abstract. And it may be that they say men and women, but or they don't say anything about gender, but you're interested in males. You won't know that until you get the full paper. So if you're unsure at first sift, it goes through to second sift. And that's when it gets really good, because you can look at the full papers and find out, do they actually answer your research question? Normally at this point, I'll transfer the papers into an Excel table so that you can manage them and put reasons why they're not included, and you have to give a reason at second sift why you won't include them. And it's imperative that you keep a log of all of these numbers at all stages. So you need to know how many went into your EndNote library, how many went through to SIFT 2, and of SIFT 2, how many were excluded for different reasons. And the reason for that is you need to make a flowchart. And this is what the flowchart looks like. Ignore the quality assessment at this point. So you've got your records. This was a very, very small one that we did. It was a review of reviews. And what this shows us is that we found 820, but actually somebody said, have you seen this paper? And we found one other, and that's called berry picking. And you can see the additional records identified through other sources is absolutely fine. Don't worry about it. And then what we did, and what you should do if you want to be published, for this one we did, 2 people did all of the sifting independently, but that was because the numbers were low. In a normal systematic review, a second reviewer will do 20% at each stage in order for you just to check that you're saying yes and no to the right sort of papers. And we always say that if there's disagreements, they would be resolved by somebody else in the team, but I've never ever had that happen. So you need to develop a preliminary synthesis. So what you're going to do is, for your included papers, and we're down to 20 now, say, we're going to make an Excel spreadsheet, and that Excel spreadsheet needs to be small enough that it's readable, but have enough information in to answer the research question. So what you don't want to do is actually transfer your paper onto an Excel spreadsheet. You need to think about, what do I need to know? So you need to have an initial description of the results. So what country are they in? What year are they in? What were the gender of the people included? How many interviews did they do? And then you need to look at what the results are saying. And it's really important that you're only including the results relevant to your research question. So your research question might only be a small part of the total research that the people are doing. So you then need to start making sense of them. And that's why I like Excel spreadsheets, because you can start putting stuff in and you start seeing patterns straight away in terms of where these papers were, where the studies were carried out, the year, all of that thing. You can start a pattern coming up as you're adding more and more papers. So in terms of when you're writing this up, you're looking at it in terms of, you want a description of the results. So the first paragraph, which is the easiest paragraph to write in results, is there was 20 studies included, 8 were from the USA, all of them were published after 2010. It's just the basic things to just set the story up for that. But then you need to start thinking about what does this all mean? And everybody thinks by the time they get to this stage that that we're onto the easy bit, but actually this can be quite difficult. So you just want to start thinking about this at this stage. What are the results? What are the things that you're seeing through the results coming out? You want to explore the relationships between characteristics and the findings. So are these all men? Are these all women? Are the studies heterogeneous? And often they're not. So even with something like an alcohol brief intervention, they may be talking about 5 minutes in one paper and 3 hours in another. And think about how theory can help us in terms of looking for them observed differences. And remember that investigation of context is dependent upon the reporting of the included studies. So a lot of studies, they've had to write this in 3,500 words to get it published. So the information might not be there. Although a lot of later studies now have supplementary data that you can go and you can have a look at, and that becomes much easier for you to find some of these things. Doesn't mean they didn't do it if they haven't reported it. So you need to look at the biases. You need to look at the limitations of the review. What is it telling me? What is it telling me in terms of what this research question is? How comprehensive was your search? Was there any potential for bias? And we go back to your reasons for inclusion-exclusion criteria. Was quality assessment done? And I'm going to talk you through quality assessment. Was it all done in a way, this is your systematic review, that somebody else could do it? Could they pick it up and do it themselves? And was your analysis appropriate? It's much easier on meta-analysis to do that, but when we're trying to make sense of things, we can become quite biased in that because there isn't a number that says, yes, this works, or no, it doesn't. So you have to have implications for the systematic review. Please don't say more research is needed. State clearly if further research is necessary. What kind of research? We always have at the end what the limitations are. And there's lots of issues around how you couldn't pull data together. And I think that is really important to understand that, as well as talking about what the message is from the results that you've found. So it's very easily in terms of a meta-analysis to say this works or it doesn't work. But in terms of qualitative work, it's looking at both sides, the barriers and facilitators, or looking at prevalence work, looking to see is it different in different countries and what does it mean? Now, it's really important that you quality assess the included studies, so your 20 included studies. Now, life has become much easier since this website came on board, and it's called the CASP. If you just put CASP quality assessment, this will come up. And they have tools for any kind of study. So you can get them for randomized trials, you can get them for observational studies, you can get them for qualitative studies, and it can help you explain the findings. Now, what it won't give you is, this is a good study or that is a bad study. This is just a way for you to discuss the quality of the studies that were included. Now, it's really important that you write a systematic review protocol. And this can be anything from 1 page to 30 pages. But it's really important so members of the team know what they're doing, why they're doing it. We've all agreed it. What did we say we'd include? What did we say we wouldn't include? Because once you get going, you forget these things. It also means that you can log that you've done this systematic review. And as I said before, for Prospero, which is around health and public health systematic reviews, you can log it onto there for free. And you can also look to see if anybody else is doing any systematic reviews that are like yours. So whether or not you do log it is up to you, but I would advise that you do write a protocol, a plan of action for what you're going to do. So when you look at writing everything up, so you've done everything now, you've got your results. I find that by looking at some of these papers, depending on what kind of review you're doing, they will actually show you the headings in terms of what you need to include. The other thing to do is look at other systematic reviews that have been published and see how they do that. Thank you.